Okay, welcome everybody in this webinar for the TITAN Network of Expertise. TITAN is a project financed by the European Union, and let's say the headline is Enabling Transparency in Food Supply Chains via the implementation of innovative and then mainly digital technologies to boost health, sustainability and safety of products, processes and diets. Today we have two eminent speakers for you. Professor Neil Ward from Norwich will present the Roadmap for Resilience and a UK food plan for 2050. And I think I attended a similar webinar recently organized by the AFN. I think it's a really nice plan, and it could also be a really good example for the EU, who is working on the CAP of the future. And the second presenter will be Ruth Marie Kondrup from Denmark, and she will speak about community-led adaptation in the Nordic food system, and she will, for instance, talk about the Nordic Seed Alliance. And these two presentations are important because we have split the disciplines we are active in TITAN in 4 key expertise areas. And today we talk about taking the food system approach, which is important for us being active in Horizon Europe projects, but it's also quite difficult. And we have split this into towards a sustainable food system and successful innovation. And I think the two presenters both will uh, uh, address the topic towards a sustainable food system. So I'm really looking forward to hear what you have to tell. The other key expertise areas are enabling consumers to make informed food choices, to facilitate supply chain sustainability, and to implement new technologies. Um, these webinars are organized for the TITAN network of expertise. And well, we offer you the possibility to become a member of this network. We have almost 200 experts in this network now, where you can collaborate within this community and where you can actively contribute to shaping the future of transparency and innovation in the agri-food sector. What are the benefits to be a member, to join a vibrant community, to stay informed and contribute, to expand your network, to have early access to information, TITAN generates and multimedia, and as I said, shape the future of our food system. What is also possible as a member is to contribute and participate in the final event that TITAN is co-organizing with another EU project, Data Food 2030, entitled Innovations to Build Sustainable Supply Chains in a Fair Data Economy for a Better Food System. We will have a 2-day event, 17 and 18 June in 2026 in the Sparks building. And we are quite ambitious. We will have 3 stages. So apart from some plenary sessions, there will be 3 parallel sessions. We will also give scientists, researchers the possibility to present posters. We will have a marketplace. We have the ambition to have more than 40 startups. These will come from the TITAN project. Also, there are several startups we know that are not in the TITAN project, but that are active on traceability and transparency. But we will also work together with other EU projects and AAT Food to reach this milestone. And then we will have a networking area for one-to-one meetings. Linked to the marketplace, where we will have more than 40 startups, we will have 2 awards, one for the most sustainable startup and one for the best one in food safety. For the 3 stages and the scientific program, we have 4 tracks, and they are linked to the key expertise areas that I mentioned earlier: enhancing food safety and reducing food fraud, promoting informed decisions for consumers, building sustainable supply chains and traceability, and developing the data economy through data spaces. And you're all encouraged to submit your abstracts so that you can give an oral presentation or maybe present a poster. We plan to have 2 awards for young scientists, one for the best oral presentation and one for the best poster. For the 4 tracks, we have within those tracks we have sub-tracks. So in the first one, we have as sub-tracks food safety management, microbial food safety, allergen management, digitalization of food safety and food fraud resilience, and new detection methods for food fraud. In the second track, enabling informed decisions by consumers, we have topics like front of pack labeling for health and sustainability, reliable data collection and sharing with consumers, policy recommendations for healthier food environment, but also we would like to give the floor to people presenting progress on education on healthy and sustainable diets, education focused on kids and their families, and school food programs to provide food, but also to teach. And then in the third track, we have subtracks like building the circular economy, reduction of food loss and waste, precision farming and carbon sequestration, digitalization in supply chain management, environmental sustainable governance, first mile traceability, for instance, focusing on forced or child labor, and seafood traceability. And in the fourth track, we combine new innovations, but those are mostly technologies like sustainable technologies, like to reuse water, new portable detection methods, applications for sensors, and we have a lot of digital innovations like federated data spaces, AI and machine learning, interconnectivity and Internet of Things, digitalization of SMEs. This is still quite a hurdle for those smaller companies, and data governance and privacy, fair data. So as you can see, we're quite ambitious, but we encourage you all to think about participating and contributing. The next webinar we have set at 13 January in next year. There will be 2 presentations. The focus will be on enabling consumers to make informed food choices, and we'd like to focus on food safety. The first presentation will be given by Matilda Milana. She's a PhD candidate at Wageningen Food Safety Research, and she is active in the Giant Leaps project, which is focusing on alternative proteins. And she will speak about the effect of the protein transition on food safety. And then the second presentation is by myself. I've started an initiative called One Food Safety, where we not only take into account the usual topics for food safety, but also an unhealthy food composition, because there are aspects in food safety that could make people sick, let's say the next day, or maybe even cause fatalities. But with unhealthy food or an unhealthy diet, we still take away healthy life years from people, which can also be considered a problem. So this is what I had to tell for my introduction. I'm really happy with the 2 presenters we have, and I'm really honored to give the floor to Professor Neil Ward for his presentation. Please, the floor is yours. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you very much. I will just share my screen. Is that sharing okay? And can you hear me okay?
Yes, it's okay. Yes.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much for the invitation to talk to you today. I'm going to talk about this piece of work which I led on, which was done by the AFN Network Plus in the UK. So I'll say a little bit about the background to the project to start with. So the AFN Network Plus is a 3.5-year project which is funded by UKRI, which is the UK Research Council's umbrella body across the different disciplines: engineering, bioscience, environmental science, and social science, and so on. And they funded a network to look at the UK agri-food system in the context of the transition to net zero. We have a target of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And the network has 3,100 members. Around half of them are academic researchers and scientists, and the remaining half splits between 3 categories: businesses and business organizations, including farming groups. Secondly, public institutions, policy-making bodies across the UK, and thirdly, the voluntary sector of non-governmental organisations. And they split roughly equally in that remaining half of the membership. So it's quite a good spread of members, half academic and half non-academic. And we have 63 project partners which supported the proposal that we put in. And we wrote the proposal in the first 2 months of 2022, and we submitted it, I think it was the 16th of February 2022. And our proposal emphasised that you have to understand the challenges facing the UK food system in the context of a lot of international uncertainty, and that we wanted to do scenario analysis and scenario planning to stretch our thinking beyond just business as usual assumptions, to think about the way that the world could potentially evolve in very different ways. And that was our pitch in our proposal, and we submitted it on the 16th of February, and within a week the Russian tanks had rolled into Ukraine and caused quite a lot of turbulence in terms of food supply chains and the economic impacts on the functioning of the food system. The project started later on in 2022. We were up to full speed in early 2023, and our funding from UKRI ends at the end of this year, although we are looking at other sources of funding, and we're going to try and keep the network going probably on a reduced format to start with and then build it up. We host webinars. We've hosted about 35 webinars over the last 3 years. They're quite well attended. We get 150, 200 participants live to our webinars, and we post them all on YouTube. And with the views added into that, we've had about 20,000 engagements with our webinar series over the course of the project. We funded about 30 research projects that are all coming to completion now, and we hold all sorts of networking events to bring people together. The three biggest pieces of work over the 3 years of the project have been to produce a set of future scenarios, which I'll talk about briefly. And then we have done some modelling of those scenarios, drawing on modelling work that was developed under a sort of sister project of one of our co-leads. And finally, this year, we've developed this publication, A Roadmap for Resilience, a UK Food Plan for 2050, which we published on the 15th of October in Westminster. So that's a bit of background to the AFN network. You can look at the activities of the network on our webpage. All of the resources are put on the webpage. We have regular digests and bulletins and all of the webinars and the reports coming from the research projects. So the web pages for the AFN network are quite a useful resource. And I also tweet about this work on Blue Sky. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking about the scenarios that we produced. I won't go into them in a lot of detail, but see if I can. Here we go. The scenarios were all about stretching thinking beyond just business as usual. And in terms of the process of producing these, one of our co-leads was Tim Benton, who's based at Chatham House, which is a London-based sort of international affairs think tank. And we convened a workshop there with participants not from the food system, but from a broader community of experts in international trade, in international agencies like the UN, and people in the UK Ministry of Defence, and people that are thinking about future sort of strategic risks. And we started to develop the main sort of framework for our future scenarios, and then developed it through 2 further workshops where we brought in more people with expertise from different aspects of the UK food system. Our focus in all of the work has been the UK, although we're mindful of the international context within which it works. The 4 scenarios that we ended up with, just very briefly, Build Back Fast Again is the closest to a sort of continuation of the last 5 to 10 years, where we stagger from crisis to crisis. If we think about the last 10, 15 years, we've had the credit crunch and the economic crisis of 2008 onwards. We've had Brexit, we've had COVID, we've had the Ukraine war, and we've had Trump's tariffs, and we've had a big cost of living squeeze. And there's a sense that with each of these hits, we have to sort of recover and quickly recover and build back fast again. So scenario A is us continuing to stagger from crisis to crisis, trying to recover back to the status quo ante before the crisis. The other scenarios are all more divergent from just rolling forward current trends. Scenario B is quite an environmental scenario where we work in a geopolitically relatively stable and continuing to be quite globalized context, but circularity and sustainable systems and sustainability values come to dominate. In self-sufficiency, we continue to face quite an unstable world where we move away from globalization towards more economic nationalism and a more regionalized world. We end up with a more circular economy, but it's driven by the need to save resources rather than any particular environmental ethic. And this one might be more akin to the sort of World War II experience of constraints on resources leading to food system change. And scenario D is one where social equity becomes a stronger value around the right to cheap and accessible food. And there's some greening there, but it's quite sort of high tech and highly processed. So they are our four scenarios. In all of them, the UK gets to net zero. So we have a food system in the UK operating within a national economy that meets the net zero target, but we end up with a very different economy and society and a very different sort of functioning of the food system. So we use these to help try and broaden our thinking. And the next phase of the work was to try and quantify these scenarios and put some numerical values on about 35, I think, in quantitative indicators to support some modelling. One output from the modelling was to produce these stylized sort of spatial representations of what UK land use might look like under the different scenarios. So when you put all the numbers into the model, you get a different expression of land under livestock farming, arable agriculture, afforestation, bioenergy for carbon capture and storage, and so on. So that it's not necessary to dwell on the details of these maps, but they do characterize different patterns of land use. And so we've used that model as a tool to play around with different ways to get to net zero and what it might mean for imports, exports, the distribution of emissions, and the type of food that gets produced and consumed. The roadmap that we produced starts with an assertion that we need a system transformation over the next 25 years. And there are four sort of components to this argument. The first is that with the effects of climate change, there's going to be a need to adapt, and whether we have an appetite for change or not, change is going to is coming. Particularly with the effects of climate change, but also with the continuing geopolitical instability. Our farming system is under strain. Farmers are not making good margins. There's a lot of unhappiness within the farming industry in the UK, but there has been quite a sort of a mindset that clings to what is currently produced. And what we were trying to do in our roadmap was to open up the question of what gets produced and what gets consumed, because all too often farming change in a net zero context is seen as being essentially about the adoption of lower emitting technologies on farms. And our modelling suggests that even if you adopt all of the available low carbon technologies, that wouldn't be enough in and of itself to enable our food system to evolve in a way that gets us to a net zero UK. So we need more fundamental change than just the adoption of green farming technologies. We've got a land squeeze. Now, this is a particular sort of UK concern because we're an island nation. So notions of national agricultural self-sufficiency still have some sort of quite strong purchase. And if we weren't to become more dependent on food imports, then we're going to need to produce more food on about 20% less agricultural land by 2025, whilst using our land for other purposes as well, particularly sequestering carbon. And we have a problem which is currently principally understood as a public health problem. We have poor diets, we have high rates of obesity and overweight, and that is leading to a public health crisis, really, which is putting pressure on our national health system, our National Health Service, and so our public finances. But we also have 2.8 million people permanently out of work through ill health, and poor diet is a key contributory factor in much of that ill health, whether it be through heart disease, cancer, or diabetes. So although this is a public health problem, it's also an economic problem. It's a problem for our public finances and how we finance and meet the demands of our health service, but also it's undermining the economic productivity of the UK workforce. So over time, I think that if trends carry on as they are, that's going to become understood more and more as an economic challenge as well as a health one. And we tend to have fragmented government. We've got a strongly centralised state, but strong departments that deal with health separately from land, separately from farming, and separately from climate change. So our roadmap introduces 3 core transformations, which are integral to a transformation in the agri-food system to deal with this bundle of problems around the resilience of the farming sector, around the squeeze on land use, and around the need for diet change for public health and for economic development. And the roadmap has a lengthy chapter on each of these transformations, and I'll talk about them all briefly in turn. So stronger, more resilient farming. Our farming has become more specialised, both at the level of the farm and also regionally within the UK. It's quite high emissions, and our emissions from our agricultural sector have flatlined for the last 15 years. So they are not coming down yet. And we are also increasingly vulnerable to shocks to the system. And so our roadmap develops a vision for a more mixed and diverse farming system, growing a wider range of crops, mixing animal agriculture and arable farming more closely together. So trying to reverse the trend towards increasing specialization, adopting all of the low carbon technologies that are available, but also changing what is produced. So quite a radical change to the structure of agriculture. But our argument is that our food system has been through change equally as radical as this in living memory in the aftermath of the Second World War. And so we need to envisage change over that kind of timescale and on that kind of level of ambition. We need to move from a more single purpose approach to land use to one where we have multifunctional uses, the use of land serving different purposes. We're quite low proportion of land forested in the UK compared to much of the rest of Europe. Only 13 or 14% of our land is under woodland. It's over 30% in France and Germany, and higher in other parts of Europe. We've also got degraded peatlands that need to be re-wetted and managed to reduce emissions and improve sequestration. And then the third transformation is around making healthier diets the default, easier option, whereas at the moment it's the unhealthy diets that are easiest and the default option in terms of the way that our food supply chains are structured and our supermarkets are organised and regulated. This is delivering serious health inequalities. We've got an over-reliance on meat and dairy in our diet, and we need to move to a system where we have more fruit and vegetables in the diet, less emphasis on meat and dairy, which ought to improve our national food security and self-sufficiency. Part of the reason why we are dependent on imports is because so much of our land is given over to animal production. Probably 85% of the UK agricultural land is either pasture land for grazing or is growing crops that become animal feed. So the roadmap contains 10 priority actions. I won't go through all of them in detail, but here are some of them, and they're to do with reform of our subsidy system. So we are developing, post-Brexit farm support scheme. Yeah, we have different ones in England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. The England one is probably where we've digressed or diverged most from the Common Agricultural Policy, and it's moving towards wholly environmental payments. But they're not very orientated to emissions reduction. They're quite orientated to biodiversity at the moment. So they'll probably need further reform. We have recommendations about machinery of government and cross-departmental working, data, planning, regulation of food businesses, and so on. I won't go through all of these in detail, but you can access the report through the website. It's available as a PDF, both a full technical report and a 25-page summary report. We stagger the recommendations through 3 periods over the next 5 years, and then the subsequent 10 years in the 2030s, and the final 10 years in the 2040s to get us to 2050. Broadly, this is about building the foundations, some pilot work, but preparing for quite a radical upscaling of initiatives through the 2030s, and then fine-tuning and embedding in the 2040s to get us to a reformed food system. I think I'm just about out of time, but there's a QR code if you want to access the roadmap directly, but you can get it from the AFN website, and there's the website address there in the orange box on the right hand side. If you Google agri-food for net zero or AFN network, it should come up, and I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very interesting. We leave the questions for later. So please, everyone in the room, when you have questions, write them down so that we can have a discussion when the second presenter is finished. So Ruth, now the floor is yours.
My name is Ruth Marie Kondrup, and I'm coordinator of the Nordic Seed Alliance, a network connecting farmers, researchers, seed savers and producers, NGOs, librarians, communities across the Nordic region. And this picture is from Myris Agroforestry in Denmark, a living experiment where seeds, soil, and people form one system. Our aim is simple and vital. Together, we will make every region capable of producing and evolving its own locally adapted seeds and food plants. Because if we can't grow what thrives where we live, we can't adapt to climate change. And if we can't adapt, we can't feed ourselves. Most organic vegetable seeds used in the Nordic is imported. Globally, mostly from Europe, often bred for long, stable seasons, not for our colder, unpredictable north. If we want resilience, we must rebuild the capacity to produce and evolve seeds where it is grown and eaten. In Denmark, we now see droughts and floods within one season. But policy doesn't match reality. In Denmark, registering a heritage crop for sale costs over 500 euros, so only 2 are on the market. The rest are locked in gene banks or lost. Meanwhile, a third of Europe's soil are degraded. Specialization has hollowed out our farming knowledge. We've separated what always belonged together: seed, soil, and society. When we talk about seeds, we're not just talking about grains, we're talking about life itself. Genetic diversity is now frozen in banks, preserved but no longer evolving. We must return it to the field. These genes need to live, to grow and adapt in farms and gardens. We call this a living seed system, where diversity evolves through use, care, and local knowledge. This depends on three foundations: genetic diversity to adapt, healthy soils to thrive, human knowledge, infrastructure, and culture to carry it forward. Together they form a living learning system, evolution in our hands, not just in a vault. Only an estimated 10 to 25% of the crop diversity humans once cultivated survives today, and less than 2% of that diversity is in commercial production. In Denmark, we have just 2 heritage peas legally for sale. But communities are rebuilding what was lost. In Sweden, the cooperative Nordfrö grows and selects seeds on permaculture and regenerative farms across many microclimates, sharing infrastructure and knowledge. In Norway, Solhatt does the same at Fockhold Farm, a large organic cooperative run by young farmers. They combine vegetable, grain, and seed production in living laboratory of adaptation. These are not those nostalgic projects. They're community research infrastructures. They generate new knowledge, adapted and new varieties, and new resilience from the ground up. Europe should recognize these community-led seed systems as innovation infrastructure, eligible for CAP eco schemes and Horizon Europe funding, not excluded by bureaucracy. We need to ensure our diverse genetics enter these living seed systems and can adapt and evolve. Regulation on heritage varieties must be simplified for small seed producers so they can enter the market and commercial production. We need investment in infrastructure of knowledge and tools for small operations. Local and old varieties are not relics. They are living libraries of traits that help us face unpredictable weather. For thousands of years, farmers selected plants for cold, drought, short days, or uneven rainfall. That memory is genetic and highly local. Uniformity is fragility. When the climate shifts, genetic diversity is the first to recover. In Nordic trials, older varieties often outperform hybrids in organic systems. Deeper roots, stress tolerance, nutrient density. These seeds also carry flavor, names, and stories. They reconnect us to land, food, and culture, and they help connect citizens to biodiversity in a very tangible way. Across Europe, soils are losing carbon, structure, and life. At Miris, they grow over 150 perennial and annual crops: kale, sorrel, spinach, goodkin, henry. They stay in the ground, hold nutrients, and keep roots alive through winter. Each hectare of humus-rich soil holds thousands of liters of water and stabilizes carbon equal to a small forest. Soil care is climate care. But most of these farms fall outside the categories that CAP and the soil health law support. They're too small, too mixed, or too innovative. Yet this is where real regeneration happens, where people are testing and teaching. Let's ensure the CAP and the soil law recognize community-based farming as part of Europe's green transition. And then to the human side, the third pillar is human knowledge. And here we are in a crisis. In Denmark, there's no formal agri-training in small-scale vegetable or seed production. So young farmers have built their own, including a seed-saving course with the Danish Seed Savers. They offer just one internship in seed production with this farmer you can see here, Alan, one of the few in the country. This is human infrastructure, the social soil where resilience grows. We need investment in learning communities, not just labs, seed schools, open data, peer-to-peer networks. Innovation policy must fund people, not just patents. The EU is proposing a reform on the seed laws called the Plant Reproductive Material Regulation that aims to harmonize rules across Europe. That sounds good in theory, but in practice, it could put seed diversity and small-scale producers at risk. The regulation expands the definition of marketing to include even small community seed exchanges. Farmers, seed networks, even gene banks could be treated as commercial operators, subject to full traceability and record keeping that could criminalize the sharing of seeds for conservation or education. At the same time, the regulation aims to simplify 12 old laws into one. And that is also good, but there are some important points that makes reality not simplification, but standardization. Articles 41 and 42, along with Annex 3, introduce new administrative burdens, from annual reporting to lab testing and separating food and seed production. These were not even included in the Commission's impact assessment. A recent survey of small producers in 16 EU countries found that 30% would reduce the number of varieties they offer. 13% said they may have to close their business entirely. These are the very producers that keep biodiversity alive, not in seed banks, but in soil, in local adaptation, in use. That's why we're asking for a living seed law, one that protects non-commercial, community-based seed system, one that recognizes that nano enterprises, often with just 1 or 2 staff, cannot be treated like multinationals, and one that ensures that genetic diversity can return to the field, not be locked behind regulation. Europe must grow diversity, not bureaucracy. The EU is currently debating whether to deregulate new genetically modified organisms, plant edited using tools like CRISPR-Cas. The proposal would allow gene-edited plants with up to 20 lab-made DNA edits to enter the market with no labeling, no traceability, and no risk assessment. That means new GMOs could enter our food systems without farmers, retailers, or citizens knowing. This undermines transparency. It undermines organic farming, and it removes the freedom to choose GMO-free food or seeds, thus reducing consumer trust in the food system. But this is not a rejection of technology. It's a demand for responsible, safety-focused regulation and for honesty. We need to invest in open source, low-risk technologies for monitoring nature, not modifying it. Tools that help us understand seed-soil interactions, support ecological research, and build knowledge, not erase it. Take the CRISPR potato case in Denmark. It is being promoted as sustainable and pesticide-free, but there is no public data about how much pesticide is actually used. Civil society requested this data, but we were denied access. It's the same playbook we saw with glyphosate, safe until proven otherwise. That's why we must insist on labeling, traceability, and public oversight, not deregulation based on promises. Europe has the chance to lead in real innovation by developing tools that help us read and restore complex living systems, not rewrite them. Let's innovate for a living seed system, not deregulate genetic forms. Let me give you another, more concrete example of how real adaptation is happening in the Nordic region. In Jutland, Denmark, our partner Landsorten, a farmer-led seed cooperative that breeds and produces diverse cereal populations directly on organic farm. They collaborate with local millers and bakers, so the seeds stay in real soil under real climate stress and evolves year by year. It is one of the strongest cases we have of decentralized community-led cereal breeding. And the key point is that they can do all of this legally because they use the 2 only pathways in Europe that allow evolving diversity to stay alive. The first one is organic heterogeneous material and is unique. It only exists inside the EU organic regulation, and it allows farmers and breeders to sell populations, land races, and evolving materials without DUS testing, without uniformity, and without variety registration. Only a simple description, a sample, and a notification is needed. This makes it possible for diversity to move from the field to the market, which is essential if we want climate-adapted crops and if we want to reach the EU target of organic seed production by 2037. This legal space must be protected. If it disappears and the PRM reforms, Farmer-led breeding disappears with it. The second breeder pathway is the breeder circle model. It's quite unique to Denmark. We haven't heard about it so many other places, but it might be, like Aurion. Here, farmers grow seed on behalf of the miller, who keeps ownership of the breeding material. Farmers are paid for a service, not for selling seed. So the seed is never marketed under PRM rules, which means it can legally evolve inside a closed group until it is ready. Then the line can either be released under OHM, register, or kept in the circle for ongoing evolution. This is how Landsorten, Aurion, and others maintain a large diversity of cereals legally, even under very restrictive seed rules. So these two pathways, OHM and breeder circles, are not small exemptions. They are the only places in EU law where evolving farmer-led, community-led seed systems can exist. If we want real resilience, they must be based on, must not only be protected, they must be strengthened. Let me take 1 minute to show what a resilient European seed system actually requires step by step. We started with the frozen diversity in our gene banks. These are absolutely essential. They are our long-term safety net, but they cannot adapt seeds to rapidly changing climates. To make this diversity useful for farmers, we need to activate it in real soils and real climate. That brings us to living seed systems. When seeds are grown and renewed in real fields, they start to evolve again. This is where adaptation begins, where genes respond to stress, day length, cold, drought, soil life. But these systems need support. Small organizations, seed savers, and on-farm conservation networks often operate with almost no resources. The next layer is decentralized breeder circles. This is where communities, farmers, researchers, and small companies cooperate to select, improve, and stabilize varieties. It's participatory plant breeding, exactly what the Nordic projects show works. But breeding has bottlenecks, biennials, crossing distances, seed cleaning, and quality testing. So we need regional hubs, light touch documentation, tools, training, and coordination. Finally, adapted varieties must become publicly available. Right now, small producers face legal barriers, fees, and expensive testing. Niche varieties are often locked out of the market, and cheap imports dominate. To reach the 2037 organic seed production target, we need a micro-producer category, incentives for regional seed production, and recognition of community-led seed systems in the CAP and in soil health law. So the message is simple. Gene banks plus living system plus breeder hubs plus fair market access equals real resilience. A system that evolves with farmers, soils, and climate, not in isolation. And then I want to end with a quote from one of the researchers in our network, Dylan, from Stockholm University. I believe it's important to have diversity in seed systems, where we also ensure that farmers continue to be able to share seeds with each other. The last point is particularly important in order to adapt to future climate change, not to mention that this is something farmers have been doing for 10,000 years, basically since the dawn of agriculture. So let's make sure Europe passes on a living legacy of biodiversity, health, and local freedom to those who grow food after us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That was really inspiring. And I think although Neil and you both have the same goal, the presentations were quite different. So now the papers are opened for questions. I've seen already one reaction in the chat. I don't know if one of the participants has a question for Neil or Ruth. Yes, Lauren, you have a question? Manuela, can you make sure that Lorraine is unmuted?
Thank you. Thank you, Edward, and thank you for the very interesting presentations. My questions was regarding Neil's presentation. You've presented a very systemic approach to transforming the whole food systems in the UK, what needs to be done to match the ambition. How is the government and your team prioritizing what to work on first, and what's your approach to testing different innovations or changes in the way the system works?
Shall I answer now?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, so yeah, that's a good question. The 10 priority actions that we pulled out were the ones that we thought were most sort of systemically significant to start with. So they are the priorities that you can read about in the roadmap. But there are lots of other recommendations as well. We do really emphasize that you have to look at the 3 transformations together, and you can't really separate them off. So the diet change one, is probably politically the most awkward and difficult in the UK political context at the moment. And I think that there are parts of government that would really like to just do the farming and focus on farming and land use, and hope that the diet thing just sort of sorts itself out. So that is the most contentious and awkward and difficult. I think a big risk is, to try and unpack and deal with things separately. But we've tried to set out a vision that is about systemic change, and therefore you can't really disentangle the diet change from the other 2.
Does this answer your question, Lorraine?
Partly, yes. In terms of concrete action to make the vision a reality, how is the projected pathway?
Well, we've produced a report. We've given it to the main government departments and some of the senior politicians, and we'll do some work in the first 6 months of next year to sort of try and promote that vision. The government in the UK has announced a review of food policy and to produce a new food strategy, and it set out a vision statement in July this year, which is quite a bold vision, and there's little that I would want to argue with in it. But the question is sort of how it can be delivered. So I hope that our roadmap provides some nuts and bolts suggestions for how, including how to manage the sort of political challenge of delivering these reforms together. So the need for cross-party consensus as much as possible, and the need to try and develop this roadmap as a positive vision for agriculture. I think there's quite a risk that the agriculture industry sees net zero as a threat and turns away from net zero, and so we've tended to put net zero more in the background and think about the cluster of problems together, which actually undermine the viability and resilience of the agricultural sector. So you have to manage the agricultural politics and the party politics, and set out a positive vision with strong leadership. I think those are the important things to think about at the outset.
Thank you.
And then I see Alan has a question.
Thank you, Edwin. Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Neil. I'm up in Scotland, and my question kind of follows on from what Lorraine was saying in terms of having like 4 devolved governments with different policies, different targets. How does that make it difficult to kind of get coherence? And on issues like the healthier diets, where now it's down to, whereas maybe before it's behaviour, it's to do with poverty and what people can afford in terms of getting them to eat healthier.
Yeah, so two sort of distinct parts to that. So it's a real challenge because our climate targets are UK-wide. Our Climate Change Committee, which advises government on how to reach net zero and how to develop climate policy, does produce recommendations at the level of Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and England, and produces reports on progress at those levels as well. But there's no getting away from the fact that there is a distinctive geography to this transformation and this challenge. So the livestock sector is economically more significant within the agricultural industry in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. The afforestation that we require is heavily skewed towards Scotland. About 75% of new tree planting in the UK takes place in Scotland, 20% in England, and the remaining 5% split between Wales and Northern Ireland. So there are distinctive sort of balanced distribution of issues and challenges across the 4 parts of the UK. The climate targets are UK wide, but agricultural policy and a lot of environmental policy has been devolved. So there is quite a challenge there, and I think that we probably need to be building more sort of sharing and coordination across the 4 parts. Devolution produced a sort of impulse towards divergence and differentiation, and we need to probably develop a sort of settlement where we recognise and are we comfortable with democratic decision making and different balances of priorities within the different parts of the UK. But there probably needs to be more regular and routinized exchange of ideas and co-working across the 4 parts of the UK, particularly in the context of net zero. On the poverty thing, I mean, I think we do recognise that that social inequality and poverty is a really significant issue tangled up with the poor diet, and to make healthy food the easy option is also to make it more affordable. So at the moment we have a sense that to eat healthily costs more. It needn't, and if over a 25-year period we plan to try and make fruit and vegetables more readily available and more affordable compared to highly processed foods, that will help. But some of that might well have to come through regulation, and we've seen regulation with sugar in fizzy drinks, and that's going to be extended to sugar in milky drinks. And I think there's scope to impose levies and taxes and try and change the financial framework for different foodstuffs to help boost the production within the UK and make the healthy option more financially affordable and physically more accessible.
Okay, thank you. May I ask how important is it considered in the UK to be able to purchase food from the region? Like to be able to buy real Scottish bread or bread from real Scottish cereals. And you mentioned the 4 regions. I can imagine there is some desire for this. I know from the Nordics that it is this happens. In Sweden or Norway, they really would like to have dairy products coming from milk from the country. So, and we see this happening on more places. Does this also play a role in the UK?
So in my working career, so the last 35 years, there has been, I think, increasing interest in geographical branding and, you know, what we might call local foods. But you have to understand, in the context of the last 200 or 300 years and the British Empire, there was a long period where the British approach was to source food wherever it could be produced most cheaply from the empire. And I think that helped to erode sort of distinctive local culinary cultures. And so that mindset of sourcing food cheaply and cheap food is still quite prominent in the political sort of establishment. But yeah, there is more interest. Sort of, it's not the same as continental Europe. It's not the same as France and Greece and you know, where there's much stronger geographical attachment to locally produced foods and distinctive food cultures than in Italy as well. But it is something that's on the increase in the UK, but probably still it's a minority of the food system.
Yeah, but it relates to the, let's say, the scenarios that you showed. Do you want to, as a country, produce for yourself, more self-sufficient, or do you want to focus producing on the export?
Yeah, so that has swung wildly over the decades and centuries. So at the start of the Second World War, the UK produced only 30% of its food needs and imported 70%. When we got to the 1980s, we were producing about 80% of our food needs. Now it's about 65%. So it's reduced over the last 30 or 40 years. I think at the moment, the main political parties would not want that proportion to fall further. I don't know that there's a strong political impetus to increase the 65% upwards, but we wouldn't want it to decline. So with the land squeeze, I think the challenge is to try and maintain our level of self-sufficiency, maybe improve it a bit, that would be good. But the parties have become concerned that they don't want it to fall more than 65%.
Okay, thank you. Then Robert asked a question for Ruth, and he wrote that he was present at the recent Plant Food Summit in Copenhagen, and he asked, do the outcomes of this inspirational Future Food-Proof Food System conference support your seed project?
Well, some of our network members were there. We had the conference at the same time, so I wasn't at the Plant Foods Summit. We had our founding conference competing at the same time. But I think in the Nordics and especially in Denmark, the drive is very strong towards the industry-produced proteins. We have some companies that are very largely into new technological methods of production. So we just had a meeting with the agricultural department Monday regarding the seed law, because we feel that the development is not good in Europe, and those things that I brought up in my presentation are very likely to happen with the plant reproductive material, that it will make it very hard for farmers to share seeds and develop together. And so it's really important that we bring this topic out together all over Europe if we want to have a chance to change the direction things are going in. And it's being all decided at the moment. So
yeah. I can imagine with the new seed law that we know that for organic there should be an exception, because the CRISPR-Cas technology is not allowed for organic, for instance.
In Denmark, but there's still it's also been proposed to open up the organic regulation, and here that case with the potatoes is brought up. That it was just an article in Denmark yesterday that we have because of the problems we have with the water, we have the fjord in Vejle where I live, we don't have any fish left. It's some mussels and crabs and grass. And so they have put a ban on 25 pesticides, and some of them are very important for potato production. And then the conventional farmers want to have more control over organic production, because they claim that the problem that they will be more infected by diseases from the organic potato production from nearby fields. And while we mean the problem is about diversity and having a wide variety of potato crops, not just relying on the same species, the drive is towards genetically modified potatoes as a solution on the conventional potato production, and that's why they're pressing very much with this argument in Denmark.
Okay, thank you. I saw that Ellen is waving.
Just to have a follow-up on your question to Neil about local food. I stay in Moray, which is in the north of Scotland. It's a very agricultural region. We grow a lot of barley for whiskey. But if I go to the supermarket to buy carrots, it'll tell me it was grown by a farmer 25, 30 kilometres from where I live. But what it doesn't tell me is it's 400-kilometre journey to the central belt in Scotland to be processed before it comes back up to be on my plate. And we only really noticed that in COVID, where our food was being harvested, but our shelves were empty.
It was a question for Neil, I suppose.
No, just a kind of statement to show how messed the food system is in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I think we have an you could say an ingredient-based food system, which means that the food processing companies that they buy ingredients that can come from everywhere and they combine them into products that can be also for sale everywhere. So it's that is very difficult to track. And in the Titan project, we are looking into transparency, and we very much would like to have the situation that consumers get well informed about what they are buying, and that also means where do the ingredients come from. And yeah, that is, I think it's in the current setup of the food system that's very difficult to achieve.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We have another question from Lorraine in the chat, and she asked to Ruth, are there similar initiatives like yours outside of the Nordics?
I think on the policy side, there are some strong networks when it comes to the to showing more the practical examples. I don't know if the same type of network forming, because we're both that we're diversity of association, from the young organic youth movement to the neighborhood association to librarians, that we're working as much on the way we're structuring and collaborating, that we use sociocracy and this dynamic governance form of organizing, so we can make everybody active from their perspective and still be connected to the rest of the group. So it's a lot about sharing information, and by that getting a stronger voice, that we have been it's very easy to portray the groups that want the kind of greener agenda as hippies, but when we're getting up to members, like the Green Neighborhood Association has 300,000 members, and when we're getting up to these big numbers of people organizing and standing behind initiatives, then we're more recognized. So it's really, I think the background for all of us to join forces was a study that was in Denmark about power dynamics, and it was pointed out that the green associations were really bad at networking, and networking is also a matter of both finance and time. so really getting into funding and connecting more with academics and other networks to strengthen our course, that I think we really need to go across all fields, from from farmers to bakers to academics, that we all need to join forces and about the topics we want to change. So no, I don't know if
when I met Ruth, I told her that I saw a documentary on Arte several years ago, and that was about a monastery in Greece, and they were growing their own food, their own vegetables, with their own varieties. But they were by law not allowed to sell the seeds that they were producing. And that sounded very strange to me. That it made a big impression, because those are the traditional cultivars that were, let's say, developed by the community in the past 1,000 years. And then they were not allowed for sale. Only the one from, let's say, the big companies were allowed to be sold. So what they did is they organized an open day once a year, and then people could come and then they could exchange seeds, and that was allowed by by law. So that's a very strange situation. And then recently I was at an innovation fair in Brussels. It was focused on Africa, so there were more than 100 initiatives there that are active in innovation, all types of innovation, but there were also several that were trying to collect the original food, for the original varieties that you have in Africa. And of course, that's a much bigger problem than collecting them in Europe, because our surface area is much smaller. But at least there are initiatives in Africa trying to do this, and I'm sure they will also be at other continents. And then maybe a related initiative are what we have in the Netherlands are called food forests. And they are also from a group of people. They buy a piece of land and they plant it full with fruit trees, berries, all kinds of food crops. and they share the crops between them. And I've understood from one of the oldest food forests we have in the Netherlands that they get yields that are comparable with what you get in conventional agriculture. So let's say these community-led food production systems, they can also be quite effective in that sense. Yes, there was one question that I noted down from Uduya Kumar. It's coming back to the issue that we have discussed. How does healthy diet shift in the people and address the future health issues positively? Maybe Neil, you can comment on this.
Well, if you take a systems perspective, there's not one solution to this. It's a whole package of issues. So you need to think about pricing and affordability. So that's to do with the regulation of retailing and processing and taxing. You have to think about production and building up the capacity to produce more cheaply within the UK. Education, public procurement helps to build new markets and new supply chains. So the state has a key role in the provisioning of food in schools and hospitals and prisons and so on, and in local government. So you can use the public procurement sector, public health campaigns, teaching about cooking and nutrition in schools. So there's a whole panoply of measures that can be considered, and you probably need to employ many of them. So there's some suggestions for how.
Yeah. Uduya, is this okay for you, or do you have an additional question on this? See no changes. Yeah, because of course let's say to get the citizens or people eat more healthily and preferably also more sustainable. We have a question from Shadi Hashem. Manuela, can you unmute her?
Sorry, I cannot see the hand.
Yeah, there's no hand. It was Hashem Shadi. There was something happening, I thought. Yeah. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Thank you so much for this very insightful webinar. I have a question for Neil. Obviously, very interesting presentation. But regarding the recommendation for more sort of transformation towards mixed and diversified farming models, and there is a key problem in the UK, as you are aware, and the power asymmetries within the land use sector. So that limits a profound large-scale transformation. So how could that be addressed with particular attention to like the grain that used for the distillery industry, livestock feed, as you mentioned, and do you see any role for punitive policies or more like use of sticks in policy making to perhaps shift these land use businesses towards more sustainable and diversified farming models?
So you're right. This is a really good question, How, and it is is stretching my thinking onto new ground, perhaps. I mean, the first thing is to raise the issue and be talking about it. So this is not something that's been very strongly advanced amongst the NGOs in the UK to date, really. But the empirical evidence is clear that there's over 50, 60, 70 years, there's been a massive geographical specialization. I think it would require a mix of sticks and carrots. So, we do have experience of managing structural change in agriculture, both in the post-war period, through productivity improvements and modernization, but also using the CAP structural measures from the 1990s onwards to improve environmental management of farm wastes and so on. So there is a precedent for the state getting involved in actively managing structural change. But yes, a range of sticks and carrots. Carrots could be capital grants to try and incentivize the development of more mixed farming. But sticks could be around control on animal numbers. We have a planning system which hasn't really been used very effectively yet to control the growth of large-scale poultry production or large-scale pig production. We've probably got river catchments with just too many animals in them, so it becomes very, very difficult to handle the waste sustainably without increasing water pollution risks. So those things, need to be handled in the round. But I think it would take a mix of sticks and carrots. And it's not a straightforward answer to that question. It would take a lot of thought, but I think the first step is to raise it as an issue and to start encouraging research projects and getting people and agricultural organizations to be buying into that vision and thinking about how.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned some initiatives, and I saw that Ruth had written down that she plans to be active within the ECOLISE project. Maybe you can explain what this is, this European project.
It's just something we're starting to plan now in the beginning of December. It's a Horizon project about agroecology in Europe. It's a huge project that runs over 8 years. So we're just planning to write an application. So that is as far as we have come. But of course, there are seed saver organizations all across Europe and maybe small farmer networks as well. And I don't know if everybody knows ECOLISE, but ECOLISE is community-led initiatives across Europe that work for climate action and transformation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then Uduya also wrote that there are also seed saving initiatives in India, yeah, which we could imagine, but you can connect and then maybe you can get some contacts, yes, there. That would be nice. Are there any other questions in the audience? If not, then I would like to thank you very much. Lorraine is waving.
Or maybe a question to you, Edward, as a TITAN project on these topics. What are the next steps for you?
The next steps, well, we have a number of pilots in the TITAN project where some new innovations were delivered. We also have work packages where we develop new policy recommendations. We try to bring out our knowledge, our information as much as we can. And as I said in my introduction, we will have this conference in June, and that's where we try to present our work, but we very much would like to welcome a debate. So we encourage all other let's say researchers or people with an initiative to come to submit abstracts so that we can get a really fruitful discussion. And that should be a certain part of the conference, let's say, more focused on policymakers. So which are the people that have to help to create change, to work on some regulations that are critical. So I think that's also part of what we try to do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for asking the question. And then Robert has some update information. So it's things are happening. So that's good that we connect people. And he mentioned some names. So from Kiki from France and Jeremy from the Danish Technology Institute, DTI. So I think you can, when you're in the chat, you can see the names, so you can connect, and then you can work together. And I see Robert, it says Stadsboer, so that's a city farmer. So I think that's also a community-led initiative. Okay, I would like to thank you all, Neil and Ruth, for presenting, all the others for listening and for asking the questions. The webinar will be posted on YouTube. I think it usually takes a week. We will inform you, and then you can relook the webinar. Thank you all very much. Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.